Policy and International Affairs at the American University of Beirut within the framework of the Arab Think Tank Network's activities. My name is Maisa Baroud. I'm a joint visiting fellow at the Emmy Council and IFI, and I'll be moderating today's session. بس قبل ما نبلش بدي أخبركم أنه الترجمة الفورية إلى اللغة العربية متوفرة. Please also note that this session is being live streamed and recorded. I'd like to start by thanking you all for joining us today for this timely and important conversation. I'll start by giving you a quick overview and some data on the Syrian refugee situation in the region before moving into our discussion. So according to the UNHCR, over 6 million Syrian refugees have been displaced to neighboring countries and abroad since the onset of the war in Syria in 2011. An estimated 2.77 million remain registered in Turkey, while an estimated 755,000 are registered in Lebanon, and around 558,000 are registered in Jordan, with host governments estimating that the refugee populations in country are significantly higher. In Jordan, for example, the government estimates that there are actually about 1.3 million refugees. Syrian refugee return is not a new topic. It's been on the agenda for host country governments, including the governments in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan for years now. Just a few years within the start of the crisis, governments were discussing return. But the fall of the Assad regime has brought it back to the fore. In Lebanon, for example, politicians were quick to state that Syrians should return now that the conditions that led to their displacement no longer existed. In an interview in January 2025, President of the new Syrian administration, Ahmed al-Shara, announced that he expects that most Syrian refugees would return to Syria within 2 years. The UNHCR projects that up to 1.5 million may go back by the end of 2025. So far, the UNHCR estimates that about 470,000 Syrians have returned to Syria, not accounting for those who returned through irregular routes, with some organizations raising questions about the extent to which this return has been truly voluntary, given the challenges that refugees faced in host countries. For Syrian refugees, the fall of the Assad regime has brought back renewed hope of a long-awaited return to their homeland, an increasing percentage, about 27%, in the neighboring countries of Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq report that they intend to go back to Syria to rebuild their lives in the next 12 months, as per a flash regional survey conducted by the UNHCR, while 80% hope to return someday. But the majority of refugees are adopting a wait-and-see approach, opting to see how the situation in Syria unfolds before deciding. And despite the fall of the Assad regime, many challenges and obstacles persist in Syria that hinder a safe, dignified, and voluntary return. At the same time, Syrian refugees in host countries face mounting pressures that sometimes act as negative push factors and which may result in their premature return. Aiming to explore the conditions shaping Syrian refugee return and the broader policy responses in the region, this webinar will answer questions related to the factors in host countries, specifically Jordan and Turkey, but which are quite similar in some cases to the factors in Lebanon, that are likely to influence Syrian refugees' decisions to return, the challenges and obstacles that persist in Syria, and what the role of different actors, including the transitional government, international and regional actors, civil society, and humanitarian actors should be in this regard. We're fortunate to be joined by 3 great speakers who bring grounded experience and expertise on this topic and who will share their insights with us. Rabia Nasser is an economist, researcher, and co-founder of the Syrian Center for Policy Research. His areas of expertise and research include macroeconomic policies, inclusive growth, poverty, and conflict socioeconomic impact assessments. Samar Muharib is Chief Executive Director of the Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development, ARD. Samar is a recognized expert in human rights, refugee affairs, humanitarian response, and women's empowerment. She has extensive experience supporting refugees and displaced populations and has championed the rights of refugees through both grassroots interventions and regional level dialogue. Dr. Ammar Kahf is the co-founder and executive director of Umran for Strategic Studies, a Syria-focused policy research center established in November 2013 and operating in Syria, Turkey, and the USA. His work focuses on governance and power sharing, geopolitics of the Middle East, and political transition in Syria. His latest publication was on decentralization as an entry point to the political process in Syria. A quick overview of how the session will proceed. The webinar includes 2 rounds of questions to each panelist. And then we will have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions to the speakers. Feel free to indicate who the question is addressed to. We've already received a couple of questions from registrants. So what I'll try to do at the end, if we have too many questions, is merge them to make time to answer the most questions possible. To kick us off, I'd like to ask each of you to reflect on the prospects of Syrian refugee return and on the factors influencing Syrian refugee return. With that, I'll turn to Rabir. Rabir, the Flash UNHCR regional survey on return intentions found that conditions in Syria play a significant role in determining if and when refugees choose to return. Can you start us off by providing a brief overview of the current situation inside Syria and reflect on what you believe are the main barriers which are hindering Syrian refugees from returning?
Thank you for all. I'm glad to be with you today. Well, I will start to say that it's post-Assad Syria, but it's not post-conflict yet. So we still have the dynamics of the conflict within the country. It's very fragile stages in terms of the institutions, the stakeholders, the actors. One simple example of that is that the control of the country so far, it's by mainly the transitional government, and the core of it is HTS, but also we have big areas like Northeast, which is not under the control. Even the Turkish controlled areas in rural Aleppo is with different governance compared to the rest of Syria. Idlib is a different governance compared to the Assad regime held areas before. So the first point is that we are still struggling after the fall of Assad, which is a great opportunity for all of the Syrians and the region to get rid of the tyranny and to rebuild a democracy and inclusive development and justice. But so far, what we can see from the first 5 months, that there is a substantial challenges. One of those challenges is the institutional transformation. So far, we can see that there is a consolidation of power, and there is a huge depending on the security and military forces. So it's still, especially from the faction point of view, and this is the mentality so far, we still don't have the state mentality in most of the suggestions and strategies and policies. We still have this kind of controlling few element of power rather than rebuilding new institutions on the national level. And I think the consolidation of power, which is look like a kind of like a seeds for oppression, it start by, lack of political participation, lack of inclusivity in the dialogue on the political level, and delaying of including the political parties and the political life. Although we have better spaces, especially for the civil society, but I think this is a very partial way of building the political participation. And the dependency on the green light from the West, which is the case in the whole region, it's actually, I think it's an illusion. Like with the green light from the West, most of the regimes in the region, they think they have the legitimacy. Unfortunately, this is not true when you don't have the legitimacy from within the country, from within the people inside it. Another aspect is the huge, I would say, primitive way of looking for the justice issue, because there is a lack of reforming the justice issue, of addressing the transitional justice in a proper way. And I think this is a huge challenge, I know, for any authority. And let's make this disclaimer, this is a huge challenge in any authority around the world. But when you start by building principles that it's against the transitional justice, here we can start the uncertainty. And the using of identity politics on the widespread in the public policy, I think this is another challenge. I don't want to make it like a gloomy picture, But I think I will end with the economic problems that we have a type of policies that it's neoliberal policies without responsibility for the state as a player in the development. And we can see that it's not just the heritage of the 14 years of conflict. We have new policies that increase inequalities. Now, how we can expect that this fragile situation can absorb 7 million refugees from outside? I think this is impossible. What we need to see in the future, and we can discuss this in details later, how we can rebuild this connection between inside and outside, Syrians inside and refugees, between the states and other actors from inside and outside to rebuild integration. But the key point for now is how to establish a trusted, inclusive institutions within the country. I think this is the key, that we need all of our effort as different actors, donors, states to support inside Syria. Otherwise, I think the fear that we are keeping the engines of conflict, which means actually increasing refugees in the future, not the opposite. You are muted.
Thank you, Rabia. Just a quick follow-up, since we have a couple of minutes. Can you reflect briefly on issues related to housing and property rights, the state of basic services in Syria right now?
Yeah. Now, from economic point of view, there is a rate. Now we are talking about displaced people. There is almost 1 million plus who returned to their places, houses. And we have like 400,000 plus refugees who came back. But so far, we don't have a judicial system that can make the case or make the process of justice. This journey for justice is very important for all of Syrians, to make sure that there is no revenge, that the people take their rights again. But we can see now that there is sometimes delay and sometimes a de facto policies that many people start to take their rights by their hands, or by a support from military groups, etc., which create a lot of unclear uncertainty and lack of trust in the public institutions. So I think this is one issue. The second issue is the poverty and the lack of at least the alternative from the government point of view. So open the discussion about how to rebuild the country with the people, with different stakeholders, is not serious yet. We still have a core group in the government or in the authority, and the link actually more smooth with the donors, with the external actors, rather than within the country. I think this is part of the discussion, to see how those people can see the alternatives, or they can contribute actually to rebuild the houses, the neighborhood, and link this to other services, because it's not just come back to the house. I need to trust the court. I need to trust the police. I need the education and health to be at least promising that they will be back in a short notice. And of course, I need a job opportunity. So far, I don't think the current, at least, policy that it's announced can promise by inclusive development. It's rather promising that the support, humanitarian support, will reduce the burden, and this mentality will not rebuild the foundation for the people to return.
Yeah, thank you, Rabia. So from Syria, we're going to transition to the situation of Syrian refugees in host countries. Samar, can you reflect briefly on the main factors, whether legal, political, or contextual, influencing Syrian refugees' decisions to return from Jordan, and a little bit also on the Jordanian government's current position or policy on return?
Thank you, Maisa, and thank you for ME Council for taking the time to enable us to reflect collectively on this complicated dilemma. And as we consider it, it's one of the most critical dilemmas in the contemporary displacement science or ecosystem we are facing, because in the Middle East, unfortunately, there are so many unresolved conflicts and many other issues are challenging us to think on ways forward and how to move on with these practical issues that we need to ensure to enhance the stabilization of our region. Saying this by itself, it's showing the different countries' policies on how to engage with these realities. There are moral and political implications that impacting everyone, governments, organizations, stakeholders, and the refugees themselves, as well as experts and researchers like us. The situation in Jordan is not easier than any of the other countries. The reality here that is the situation of refugees is deteriorating, unfortunately, by the moment, given the economic situation for both host communities and refugees. Access to job market is shrinking day after day. The cuts of aid that were imposed on different agencies is another issue that we were not expecting to hit us that quickly. Unfortunately, for example, food insecurity now it's a critical issue. 83% of refugees in host communities are sharing that they are facing severe to moderate food insecurities. The same inside the camps, around 81% of the refugees are facing that level of food insecurities, which is an essential commodity for their, let's say, livelihood situation in Jordan. Taking this into consideration, that as well impacting their decisions to return, they are thinking of the situation in Syria, as Rabia explained, is not much easier. The reality there is impacting their situation here. They are not expecting that it will be much easier in ensuring all of these social protection services or the financial situation that would enable them to live in dignified way, as well as the protection issues they are concerned about. At the same time, there is the logistical issue about the return factors. There are so many concerns about how to ensure the safe return and easy return to their homes. There are legal considerations. There is financial considerations, as well as protection issues related to certain identities, such as women and girls, single female-headed households, unaccompanied children, and a lot of complicated issues related to their documentation and what needs to be done before they depart. In terms of Jordan policy, as it's announced, it's clear that Jordan is going to ensure the protection of all refugees' right to return, voluntary return, but ensuring as well as their safety and their potential dignified life conditions inside Syria. So they ensure that the borders are open 24/7 from the both fronts, Nasib and Jaber borders points. There are many coordinated services with the Syrian Red Crescent, as well as UNHCR to ensure basic health services at the borders. Many announcements related to customs, related to fees for taking belongings of refugees are being announced, as you can see from all the updates shared by UNHCR. We have many services coordinated by the governments to resolve related issues to documentation or unpaid debt or complicated other files they may use. There are hotlines. There are counseling offices that is offered by both the government, UNHCR, and as well as partners to UNHCR, the NGOs, communities who are mandated to do so. In terms of other policies that needs better enhancements is the re-entering Jordan policy, which is a determining factor for many refugees, whether to go back or to wait until these decisions are made clearer to everyone because, as we know, they are taking what we call it as scouting visits. They want to see, they want to ensure that they can go back, especially men and boys. 50% of the people who's returning from Jordan are men and boys to go to check, but they want to make sure that they can come back to Jordan. Other policies is related to third countries, refugees who's passing through Jordan, whether they would be ensured the entry to Jordan and continuing the trip to Syria, or how to come, whether it's through road trips or through the airport, which is easier. And lots of these issues need better communication plans, how to communicate with the refugees, but as well as with the related stakeholders. So in summary, the policy is clear. We need to make sure of the safe pathways of return. This is the government decision. There is no encouragement, but there is no deterrence, or there is no, let's say, objections, given the political relation with the new regime in Syria. However, realities in the ground keep triggering our abilities to respond to the massive needs we are witnessing with this decision of return to many refugees. As you explained, Maisa, luckily the numbers are not that big so far, but the questions are much, much larger on how to solve these issues. One of the main critical considerations for refugees, of course, as Rabia explained, the lack of infrastructure, the safety, stability, security situation in Syria, but the financial aspects are still the main problems. Whether the financial aspect related to their stay in Jordan, life, as explained, is not easy for them here. And with the cuts of funds, they are lacking so many services. At the same time, they are looking back into Syria, what the future is hiding for them. Many families, they are advised by their relatives to keep a budget of up to 6 months saving to be able to cope with the demands in Syria. And reflecting on what they are facing here in Jordan, they are subject to lots of payments related to unmet services, shelter payments, and other livelihood requirements. In addition to that, the cost of transportation, even it's a big consideration. Families reported that the average is around 1,000 USD dollars just to go back with essential belongings of furniture and food and so on. So these considerations, in addition to other protection services, as I said, not all the families are in one unit. So there are complicated situations for women and girls, separated families, separated spouses. They have to really decide whether to go back as families responsible of other children or to stay in Jordan. So that's increased the demand on legal aid services and counseling. I don't know if I answered all of your questions between the government policies and realities and concerns for both, not only for the refugees, but for all of us as well, on how we can meet the high demands of queries.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samar. I think you reflected very briefly on some of the gendered issues. So what is different in terms of factors influencing return for men and women? So men and boys and women and girls. Could you, in 2 minutes, just reflect specifically on some of the issues faced by women and girls?
Of course, maybe the return decision, it's much more recurrent towards the men and boys because they think they are the ones responsible to seek the future for the rest of their families. But as well as we know that there are many families headed by single women here in Jordan, and there are many women are taking the decisions as well on behalf of their families as shared by the report, which I will be reflecting again on the role of other stakeholders to update us with such kind of information. 55% of the returnees are men and boys, and this would deprive other women from taking the similar, let's say, facilitations to be able to go back and have the courage to cross the borders and facing the unknown there and facing the unknown to come back for her family there. I don't want to say that there are other issues to be considered, like gender-based violence, lack of compensation for essential services by pregnant women. There are women with diseases as well. They are receiving services here in Jordan. I don't want to say this is one of the main issues that they are thinking of, but in the reports, it was shared. What if women face one of these situations? What will happen to her? What kind of support she will face? But luckily, the community of the organizations who is providing these protection services, they are working together to ensure that the minimum standards of protection for women and girls are available, given all the restrictions on funds and accessibility to certain communities.
Thank you so much, Samad. With that, I'll turn to Dr. Kahf. Dr. Kahf, how has the Turkish government's position on Syrian refugee return evolved since the fall of the Assad regime? And what are the key considerations driving their return agenda?
Well, thank you very much again for the organizers. The Syrian refugee issue in Turkey is not different from many others. It has to do also with relationships with Europe and the agreements with Europe. Has to do also with the economic crisis, especially post-COVID. But even before that, tensions domestically with between the host community and Syrian refugees have increased since, I would say, post 2016 coup attempt throughout 2018. 2020 was also the COVID years. It became a very electorally politicized file with political parties promising how many people they will ship back, with political campaigns as well, using videos that later were withdrawn and apologies given and so forth. But nevertheless, that symbolize the amount of deep divisions within Turkish society on the impact. And fast forward to December 8th, I think there was a moment of realization in terms of, well, okay, now is the moment. Let's send them all back. And then all of a sudden, there is a realization that they will, a lot of the economies, employment sectors, some of the factories, seasonal working, and even like the market for used cars, the markets for rent. All of a sudden, there's a vacuum. And when people started actually going back, I think that's where the brakes were pulled on this policy. And recently, so there has been a shifting policy in the last 6 months since December 18, with different institutions making different judgments until there was a conference at the end of April, I believe, 28 or 29, which was headed by President Erdogan, announcing a more comprehensive approach to the Turkish policy on refugees. On one hand, it still continues to focus on preventing future inflows of refugees and facilitation of return. But on the other, catching up and trying to work on capitalizing on the social and economic benefits of refugees in Turkey, speeding up processes of citizenships, speeding up policies that will allow people to come back, opening up a migration office in the Turkish embassy in Damascus, for example, and an economic attaché, a military attaché, all of those very quickly, I think symbolizes how the Turkish policy quickly adapted to the new realization, trying to make sure that they realize there's at least, you're talking about 1 million school children in schools in Turkey. Many of those schools have been supported by grants and have been actually impacted very positively their local communities and worked on integration and so forth. At least 60,000 students today are in university level education Syrians. I think a lot of those, and if I go into statistics of the economic sectors and whether it be the low income, but also very sectoral and service sectors that are occupied by Syrians. So when the Turkish government announced a go and see policy, many people were, because of the public perception that if we go under this program, we may, our name might be written on some record, and therefore later on, even though the government provided all promises, but nevertheless, the public perception was still fearful of using this. So very few people, actually, the numbers are about 20,000 that use this. Although the total number of returnees probably is close to about 200,000, at least according to Turkish numbers, of people that return back, and many are expected to go back after June 20, which is the last day of schools in Turkey this summer. And so the current Turkish policy has a two-pronged approach. One is to prevent future, but also the second, which is now focusing more on developing policies that will capitalize on the social economic benefits, minimize the impact of returnees on local employment markets and the local job market. Syrians have occupied actually significant sectors in the textiles, for example, in the farming, in again, the service oriented. Nevertheless, at the same time, Syrians many of them came as one family to Turkey 13 years ago, and now their kids have kids, and they have 4 or 5 families. And assuming they still have their house intact in Aleppo or Damascus or anywhere, or Suwaida, then assuming that the house is still there and is safe to move in, well, they left the country with 4 people or 5 people. Now they're about 30 to 40 people. I mean, Syrians, relatively the first generation of Syrians, also there was a statistics on that recently, but it's very controversial because it's also very politicized that Syrians in Turkey have at least double the population growth. They get more babies than the average Turk. At least that was, and then a second report says, well, the second generation are actually averaging back to the general normal within Turkish society. So, but generally, yes, I know a lot of families that now have multiple families, and number one, the infrastructure is completely depleted, destroyed. The country is in ruins. The institutions are in ruins, if any. A lot of institutions are just basically barely have paint on them. And I haven't seen a ministry with a computer, for example, that's working, including the Justice Ministry that I've been to. And so, the very fragile service sector, public services, the infrastructure. Of course, as mentioned, my colleague, the lack of the fragmented political scene as well, and security scene is a huge, I think, something that pushes people away from making the decision to return. The issue of health and education, how much is it available? When I first went to Damascus in the December, and there was a tour as well by Syrian American doctors, you can barely find a public hospital with an MRI or an X-ray machine in Damascus, let alone the suburbs and the different areas. So the sectors of not the general services, but specifically health and education. And then you have, of course, the economy in a very disastrous, a very complicated situation. You have reintegration challenges. I'm about to end. I see you unmuted. Reintegration challenges. Kids coming back from Turkey speak Turkish. They're looking for Turkish schools if they want to go back,
Yeah.
or they need special education in the summer to reintegrate them. Let alone there is a huge reintegration problem within IDPs coming from northern Syria which we still have about 2 million in tents, that has not ended. It doesn't disappear overnight. Many of whom who tried to go back to Damascus went back to Azaz and Idlib. They found it unbearable, not only public services, but also very difficult to reintegrate different curriculums, different standards and processes and procedures. So the issue of IDPs, I think, also is a top priority, maybe even before refugees, to ensure that there's adequate economic service and you know there's not enough homes. We're talking about at least 3 million homes or units. Some people say 2 million, up to 3 million. There's no actual figure in my research, at least, of how many housing units have been lost. But certainly there's in the millions. And so that, and then obviously you asked the question about HLP. I mean, you make it much more difficult to even begin to think about relocation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hamad. Thank you to the three of you for your reflections. I think both on the factors in host country and in Syria influencing the decisions of Syrian refugees to return. In this second round, we'll explore what is needed during this transitional period and in the longer term in Syria and in neighboring host countries to facilitate a safe, dignified, and voluntary return once conditions allow, but while also ensuring the protection of Syrian refugees as they remain in host countries. Samad, I'll start with you this time, and then I'll zoom in a bit on Jordanian civil society, given Ard's work over the past few years during the Syrian crisis. What role can Jordanian civil society and other international organizations based in Jordan play to ensure that return remains safe, voluntary, and dignified?
Thank you, Maisa. In fact, the situation that the civil society in general is facing is not less complicated than the other realities that hitting us nowadays. The issue of US aid, the cuts we face from so many donors in the region, as well as the biases towards certain files on the expense of the other files, that made it much harder for all of us. Saying this, I would like to as well re-emphasize that the Syrian refugees crisis is not in isolation from the other issues we are facing in the region. For instance, in Jordan, there are 16 different camps for refugees. 13 for the Palestinian refugees that they are here in Jordan as a fact since the 1948 or the 1967 and other times in history. They are facing not less critical situation with the cuts that UNRWA is facing due to other political issues in the region. And there are 2 or 3 other refugees camps for the Syrian refugees. In addition to 50 other nationalities of refugees, they are resorting to Jordan until the future become clearer to their host countries or to their home countries, like the Sudanese, Somalis, and the Yemenis as well, and many other nationalities. Even the Iraqis, they are still, many families, they are still stranded between the different geographical places that they can resettle for their futures. The hope for resettlement is the main critical, let's say, issue in their minds. They are all seeking better futures for their children and for their grandchildren, where they can enjoy better legal identities, where they can continue their life normally. None of the refugees I would know or I know they would be happy to be just dependent on aid or on services. Saying this, it doesn't mean that the aid organizations are thinking they are very not sufficient to what we are facing, because sometimes this is the feeling that we are having. What can we offer to cover all of these massive needs? There are so many exercises now to prioritize and do deprioritize, but it's really difficult to prioritize essential services that would you think that there is a child who would need education or extracurricular education services or additional health service that will enhance their life. But now the prioritization is much deeper. What sectors needs to remain there, whether to keep food, education, or we can ensure the other protection services for people with disability, women and girls who are in bad situations due to different vulnerabilities and living in different hardships. So the prioritization exercise is a torture exercise, as I would clarify it, because it's putting lots of responsibilities on us. At the same time, here where the, let's say, the understanding from everyone to come together to overcome these challenges, it's crucial, and it's happening in Jordan in a good way. There is a working group. It's the Jordan Operational Durable Solution Working Group, which is issuing what we call it the Refugees Community Pulse, where we are collecting feeds from the refugees, and we try to engage with them through different avenues, just to make sure that we are reflecting the realities as it is from the refugees themselves. Collecting this kind of data, doing all of these needs assessment is one of the main essential roles that we are proudly doing, and we are enhancing our abilities there, as well as the coordination to overcome any kind of duplications or gaps that we are not seeing in the ground. The advocacy efforts we are handling as well, it's important on the political level as well as the social level, because the narratives, as you can see on the social media towards the refugees, needs to be captured, needs to be addressed as well. There is lots of tension between communities in these times, and lots of false information we need to capture and to respond to. At the same time, how to share this information with refugees. Not all refugees have the same capacities to access technology or to reach out to where are these counseling services to inform their decisions of return. So you need to make sure that your information, your services are reaching out to them. So there are different responsibilities on the stakeholders, whether they are national organizations or international organizations. The good thing in Jordan, UNHCR and other UN agencies, they are keeping the flag on in terms of having this comprehensive coordination ability to bring everyone on the same table. The local NGOs, they have their own platform where they are coordinating among themselves, as well as the INGOs and the interagencies. And we are, let's say, having a good ecosystem, good environment where we are working together in a positive way. And we hope it's the same. It will be in Syria, where we see respect to localization, where our local actors are brought into the table, are well heard, resources and equal partnerships are available for everyone, where the international NGOs can work safely and adequately in partnership with local NGOs, and they all have the same regard in donations and funding, as well as the acceptance and the welcoming from the new regime. Many now cross-border visits are occurring, and one of them, it's one of these dialogue platforms that, thank you again for enabling us. It's happening more and more to bring the region as a one geographic realities, and what's happening in Turkey is affecting Jordan. What's happening in Lebanon, we have to look at it, and all of this is positive. It's encouraging that we are up to the moment of needs, but the needs in the ground are much, much more than our abilities, unfortunately. And we cannot just neglect that the deteriorating political and security situation, especially with the Israeli, for example, hits recently on Damascus. It's just making the scene is more complicated. So we hope that our joint efforts would address these political realities first, ensuring working with our government to take the right choices in their, let's say, negotiations with other countries, make return not as a bargaining chip for refugees, but as a reality on the ground. What is the best for these communities? Most of us face displacement, whether as seeking job opportunities elsewhere or being refugees ourselves as well. And we know how difficult the situation for the refugees, how much as you are empowered still being a refugee, being a displaced, feeling of alienation, nostalgia, lack of belonging, all of these psychological issues is preventing a new generation to flourish in this region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Samar. With that, I'll turn to Ammar. And I think, Samar, you mentioned the importance of localization. And I think, Ammar, if you could just reflect on the role of civil society in this question that I'm about to ask. So, drawing on your work on local governance in Syria, what institutional and political reforms would you say are the most critical for achieving longer term stability towards facilitating a sustainable return? And what should the role of the transitional governance and civil society in shaping these reforms be? I know it's a big question. Maybe the focus can be a bit just on the aspects most important to return.
Well, I mean, I think let me start with civil society because that's probably the easiest here. Of course, civil society organizations and civil society in general have grown a lot in the last 12 years and have had also work before that, the roots of which go, for tens of years. But I think it's undeniable that the last 13 years have also witnessed a huge growth and maturity and evolution of the role of civil society organizations in filling a vacuum that should not be covered by the government itself. It's not only that civil society is doing what the government cannot do or is unable because of lack of resources, but also there are certain areas that civil society is the natural actor in it. And so I think in terms of the medium to long term, there needs to be a complete change of the law for nonprofits in the country. The current legal system is not only depleted, but also goes back to the Jamal Abdel Nasser's era of which basically wanted to end and to crush any type of civil society at that time. So the whole philosophy of the law of 1948, I think, 1953, if I'm not mistaken. Is it law number 93? I think if I again, but it's the civil society law, the non-profit قانون الجمعيات. So it has a lot of restrictions. It has a lot of it's based on a philosophy that the government knows best what to do and will tell you what to do, and that civil society have to basically obey the laws and just follow whatever they're told to do. This is the entire philosophy have to be flipped 180 degrees, whereby civil society is empowered, is patriotic, is based on is part and parcel of their local societies. And I think this is where the civil society organizations that have survived throughout the years in Damascus and in Suwaida and in the coastal areas and others, as well as civil society that have evolved in the Northwest and Northeast and in Turkey, in Jordan, Lebanon, and neighboring countries that are now able to bridge this gap and bring people, those who want to go back, that are able to be supported and empowered and given both economic incentives, social network, support network that goes along. So in terms of reforms that are needed, of course, I think this is probably one of the most priority laws that, and not just the laws, but the institutional culture around it within the different ministries and public government institutions. But if I may take a step back, I think if the current administration's priorities in terms of governance revolves around the issue of efficiency. And how the question is, how do you make public institutions more efficient, lighter in weight, and able to resolve problems much faster? Regardless of a lot of disagreements and fundamental disagreements with some of the things that the new government have fallen short of. But a lot of these institutions they act on their own as well, and they have a culture within them. And so how do you change the entire institutional culture of public sector to become lighter, more efficient? You have now a push towards consolidation of territories, consolidations of public institutions in the Northwest, in Idlib, in the Northeast. We have a process that's unknown how that's going to be. We have the agreement in Suwaida, the agreements in Daraa, the traumatic issues that took place and the violations that took place in the coastal areas. So you have the government's mindset is focusing on reintegration of territory, reintegration of security actors, and unfortunately they don't have a bandwidth to go beyond these two at this point. Or they don't want to, I don't know. But regardless, I think, and so I think the shift in the medium term and even short term has to also balance with the issue of decentralization. So yes, we need to reconsolidate, reintegrate, re-centralize, but then you also need to decentralize quickly so you do not become a bottleneck of development and you end up doing nothing at the end. And that doesn't help refugees, obviously. So I think the biggest challenge now is how do you balance these two? Reconsolidation, bringing this governance, the fragmentation of governance mapping in Syria, and developing like a national roadmap for governance reform. Law 107, can it be reformed or does it need to be completely redone? We need to start somewhere. Law 107 is the law on local administration in Syria that was passed in 2011. And how is that going to be accepted by local communities? So I think there is content and there's process. And sometimes they make a very nice content without a process is useless. You have a process, but with a bad content, it may go through even better. But I think what you need is a little bit of both, where you have a process of engagement of local communities and a buy-in by and you know the buy-in of different stakeholders and different communities for a new governance structure, let's say, or governance approach, let's say, that is that understands this very diverse map of Syria, both in terms of demographics, but also in terms of history and demands and so forth, and also balances with efficiency and discipline and order, not as compared to anarchy and chaos. This is where the challenge is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ammar. I have a follow-up question, but I think I'll leave it for the Q&A just to make sure that we stay within our dedicated time of 1 hour, and I'll move on to Rabia to focus a bit on the political economy perspective. So Rabia, from a political economy and developmental perspective, what are the most urgent reforms needed to facilitate the sustainable return of Syrian refugees when other conditions allow?
Yeah, maybe I might highlight this inside Syria and maybe take some examples from Lebanon, so to see this dynamic. Because, for example, if the whole region is investing in conflict economies, so it's very difficult to say that let's build a productive economy to bring the refugees back. If there is a substantial investment in military expenditure, in drugs, in human trafficking, so it's very difficult to start to say let's have a better environment. So I think there is a regional issue, and if we talk about refugees and displacement, the genocide in Gaza just increased the number of displaced people and refugees by communities, by whole communities. The war in Lebanon, the same by Israel. If we look to Syria after the fall of Assad regime, there is a return, but there is also people who are displaced and ask for asylum after the massacre in the coastal area. So the engine is working to increase or to push the people to flee. So it's very important when we look from political economic point of view that we have a sound institutions the people can trust and an economic inclusivity as well. So from this point, when we say that let's tackle the roots, why the people in the first place flee, the response that this is a normative approach and this is not a practical one. And when we say, okay, after 14 years and more, the practical way of doing like humanitarian approach is not working. Actually, it's, increasing and deepening this huge crisis. And the response that we don't have enough power and resources. So there is always this pragmatic way to escape from the core issue that we have to ask the government of Lebanon why you keep repeating that the refugees are the cause of the crisis in Lebanon. I mean, we know, and the people know, and the authority know that this is not the major issue of the collapse of institution in Lebanon. So the repeat of, use the refugees first as a cause of the great threat of the country. And this is not just in Lebanon, but I'm giving this as, since we didn't mention Lebanon in our discussion. And the second point, that you deal with the refugees as an underclass. Now, I will say there is a conflict in Syria and I can't do anything about it. Okay, with this assumption, what I have to do with like 25% of the population that come from Syria. It's Syrians. I don't like it. I don't want it. How do I deal with it as a policymaker? It's not 3 months. It's not 6 months. It's years. So there is an integration from developmental point of view that I will build and invest a good relation to keep my society healthy. All this political identity politics that use this kind of hate speech and the investment in tension, it's actually lose-lose scenario for now and for the future. And the second point, that you need development and you need to expand your economy. So you have two choices, like the Turkey before 2017, as Ammar said. So they opened the spaces for the Syrians to invest. So they expand the economy. They didn't, compete. They actually make new opportunities and expand the growth for job opportunities and for economic sectors. So this is not easy to deal with, but you can't give it the way to go through a progressive expansion approach, or you say, no, I will put you in the camps, or I will all the time deal with you as informal. So instead of have my residency to work and to support and to be part of the taxes, to be part of the formal system, I am always under the informality. I am always under a class. So my social relations is abandoned. My political inclusivity is abandoned. So first, you are taking this problem, burden, which we agreed about, and expand it in this regard. The second, okay, even in the future, if we look for this integration between Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and Syria, and Jordan and Syria, this way of dealing with refugees is not the right way to invest, not in the capital, social capital, neither in the economic relations and integration. Now, inside Syria, I think the core issue is how the government see the economy. So far, we have a huge concentration in two issues. The first one is the security and military. So there is a lot of investment on this sector, which we understand it as they are new to the authority, they want to consolidate it. What we don't understand it, that they want the HTS to control the key positions now in the bureaucracy and in the economic sectors. So it's kind of closing group to control the economy. This will exclude millions of refugees and Syrians from all governorates. So this way is not the best way to attract people to come to help or to support. The second point is the new liberal, what we called it the new liberal policy. Now you open the fragile, destructive economy to the competition, to open the border for imports, and you hurt your what remain of your agriculture, what remain of your manufacturing. So this way of saying that, okay, this is not my responsibility, you deal with it as you are private sector, civil society, etc. I think this is a way of withdrawing from their responsibility, and I can understand this is their experience in Idlib. So the state is doing quote unquote doing the minimum in terms of protection, organizing, and they give I will say crony people who are very close to the authority a key private sectors to control. This network is not completed yet, but I am looking for how they rebuild it, and I'm afraid that this is not the way how you include people to bring the development back and their effort and money back to the country, and even the people within Syria. The third critical issue from in the economy as well, that this lack of transparency, like why there is no liquidity, okay, there is no money in the central bank. Great. After 5 months, where is the collection of revenues? How much? Why we don't have liquidity at all? Why we are asking people to give us salaries from outside? This lack of transparency, I think it's a very unclear it's not unclear, but I think it's not the promising way to bring people for inclusivity.
Yeah.
And the last point, that given the huge loss of the Syrians, you can't tell the refugees, for example, to leave the social network after 14 years and come back to rebuild the social relations and economic opportunities. And the same for the Syrians inside. Like you come and you say, okay, I will reduce the subsidies for bread. Now, 90% of the people are under poverty line, and this kind of shocks for them, even if this is the right economic policy, quote unquote. You make shocks for the people and their economic opportunities and economic welfare that make their uncertainty at this, I mean, at very high. So this make the return is very challenging. Now,
Yeah.
if just 1 minute to say,
Yeah. Okay.
from political economy point of view, it's not that you capture the authority and the wealth and the power. Actually, this is not the truth. You, as a political new regime, from internally, from within the country, they need to open the space for inclusivity in the economy and in the political space to gain the social support and to gain stability, which is the key now. And I think the neighboring countries need to support those as well, need to support the inclusivity inside Syria and to deal in a calm way, in a right to protect way with the refugees, not to push them, because I think this will, pushing them now in a very rapid way will make an explosion inside Syria, and this will again make more refugees in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabia, for your reflections. Thank you all for your reflections in this round. I had an additional question, but I'm going to jump to the Q&A, and then I'll ask it as a question in the Q&A if we have some time at the end. There were actually 2 or 3 questions around this similar issue about minorities and how we can ensure their protection in return. Knowing that already knowing that post the clashes in the coastal region, there has been an outflow of Syrians, for example, into Lebanon. So how can we ensure that return remains safe for these minorities, for these minority groups, including those who were pro-Assad, so pro-Assad refugees? I don't know if anyone would like to answer that. Omar?
I can jump into it,
Yeah,
sure. I think if we're talking about medium to long term, the short term is very difficult. It's very compounded issues that are difficult, very difficult to untangle. In the medium to long term, I think the question of development comes in. I mean, investments in highly poor and impoverished and disenfranchised areas is a top priority, in my opinion. Yes, reconstruction, but a lot of people will begin reconstructing their homes. But in areas where people lost jobs, especially let's say in the coastal areas and some of the chronic causes of social tensions go back to the issue of lack of resources and lack of jobs. It's the economy, as they used to say. It's the economy that's the main driver for social reintegration. At least that's my view. Can the government do it alone? No. Can the government fully withdraw from its responsibilities? Also, no. But I think we need to reach a balance. That balance will take time to be reached. But in the meantime, I think a lot of those areas need, when people have full-time jobs, they tend to worry less about these tensions, and it will be one of the ways. It's not the only solution, but it's one of the solutions that will allow people to reintegrate, allow people to move on. Of course, transitional justice is something that's very highly needed at the same time. You can't do transitional justice without jobs, and you can't do jobs without transitional justice.
yeah,
So, the people who committed crimes to go and have crony jobs and get their businesses back up and running when they used to, be involved directly in the killing of people, that's not going to work, regardless of which side, whether Assadists or elsewise or ISIS for that matter. But I mean, and so I think one of the entry points to this is actually lifting. Someone mentioned about sanctions. Yes, sanctions is a killer today, and even yesterday. Before December 8th, we at Omran we published we had a position on not all sanctions, but especially sectoral sanctions and overall, the self-imposed by the U.S. Sanctions specifically that sanction areas of electricity, of technology, and then you have the over-compliance as well. I mean, that hurts people every day. And you want to talk about an MRI machine, you want to talk about education, a lot of those areas with quote unquote minority or different diverse communities have been relying on government jobs when the government now cannot provide these jobs. So
mm,
part of the solution, I'm not saying this is the only solution, but part of the solution is to create avenues for employment, to build, to invest in those areas, both in the coastal areas, in Suwaida. I've always, for example, asked for a pathway to Jordan. Maybe this is, a border crossing where they could breathe rather than them being reliant on Damascus completely in terms of economic activities and bread and so forth, but
yeah,
also having economic prosperity provide stability. What is the biggest threat today? To be very frank, Israel, as my colleague mentioned, that has been the biggest destabilizing factor on the ground. No one wants
yeah,
war. No one wants an escalation with any of the neighbors. Syrians, both the Syrian government and Syrian people, they want peace. They want a de-escalation with all people, with all sides, with all elements. People are sick and tired of continuous lack of stability, and so
yeah,
I think that will move things forward.
yeah,
Lifting of sanctions unconditionally. You can sanction individuals, be it go ahead, but sanctioning an entire country and entire ministries is close to being criminal, in my opinion.
yeah. Thank you so much, Amal. I think you answered actually a couple of the questions here. There was just one follow-up question, and somebody who had already mentioned a bit the impact of US aid cuts and aid cuts in general on the Syrian refugee crisis management in Jordan. But Rabia, can you reflect a bit on how this shrinking aid is impacting return?
Yes, I think now there is two things about the aid. The first one is the strategies of humanitarian aid, which is a kind of not tackling the core issues. For example, we fight with different actors just to address issues from developmental perspective, and they assure for 14 years to work from humanitarian point of view. Because, I mean, their argument, they use it, I would say, that the people need bread. And we say, yes, but this is the long term. So we need to invest in the governance, infrastructure, social solidarity, etc. And there is this kind of, for different political and technical reasons, they want to make it safe, like make it a delivery of a baskets. It's a safer and it's better for them. And let's work actually. So I think the mentality of a humanitarian after the Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza and more crises need to go through different substantial transformation to look for humanitarian aid to build and to enhance development, not to just tick the boxes in terms of supporting people in need.
Yeah.
The drop is not just now. I think the drop is even before the COVID. We start to see this drop in humanitarian support. And after COVID, under the umbrella of that, there is a global crisis. We can see that this is withdrawal of many of the fund in terms of supporting humanitarian issues. Now the problem that we have with the US that it's not just a drop of the fund. It's actually changing the policies around the world toward developmental support, developmental assistance. It's make it like we don't care anymore about this. We don't want to use this soft power. So
Yeah.
even with all the benefits that they gain from this soft power, now they even want to get rid of this. So I think it's a good opportunity to rethink that the dependency on the humanitarian aid is no longer an option.
Yeah.
So what is the alternatives from inside and from different South countries support and integration?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Rabia. Unfortunately, I think we have to wrap up. Feel free to send me any questions by email. I can liaise, reach out to the speakers and then reply. I'd like to thank you again, Rabia, Samar, and Ammar for a rich and timely discussion. And then thank you to all of you who joined us. Stay tuned, stay tuned. You can subscribe to the Arab Think Tank Network newsletter on Substack. I'm going to add the link in the chat. Just a second. Other than that, I think we're done for today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ammar, Samar, and thank you, myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. يعطيكم ألف عافية.
يعافيك. شكرا كثير.
Thank you.
باي.
Bye. Bye. Bye.